Hey traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from its Tribeca Trade Group with your Wednesday afternoon market recap. And wow, what a day it was! Pretty amazing in terms of some of the things that were moving. Actually, a lot of things were moving. So I'm going to go through some of those, and then we're going to go through today's option activity, which was all over the place as well. A lot of interesting call buyers and a lot of momentum guys just coming in. That's typically half of what the aggressive call buying is it's just guys who are playing momentum, not causing momentum necessarily, but playing it. Once something starts to move, somebody buys calls in it. And we kind of spot these things out on a day-to-day basis. We'll start to say, hey, this thing is starting to really move, this particular name, and then all of a sudden a call buyer goes up. So they're just kind of looking at the same things. I think sometimes traders confuse that when they're looking at option activity. There's always your big block trades that go up too, which they may either know something or they've got a particular catalyst. Or they may just be seeing a little bit of momentum and picking up on some clues in the marketplace, just like you do and I do on a daily basis when we're starting to look for names that are either breaking out. So anyway, that being said, let's just go over the major indices. It was kind of the first couple hours of the day was the usual. I would say, a little bit of disappointment to watch us kind of get bid in the pre-market and then give it all back. Now, so 24.94 and a half was the level that I sent out earlier. You could follow all this on my Twitter feed, but I did send this out earlier. 24.94 and a half was the support level for us to hold. We did that. We maintained and then we rallied pretty hard. So, S&P fine, up 35 basis points. A move in the right direction. We came off the highs pretty decently, but this was really not where the action was as usual. I always just kind of start there because it is the S&P 500. Really, what it was today was the IWMs, and look at the volume today on the breakout in IWM. Pretty spectacular. And I noticed these things were starting to get overbought the last couple of days, but we got a gap up and basically a gap and go. This was up over 2% today, the small caps. So amazing and really strong. The small caps are a leading indicator. So, there's not much you could really say or, talk about. I mean, this is way overbought now. So that's the the only thing I would be looking to sell call spreads here in the small cap index. It's just too overbought. We just don't stay, I think I said this yesterday, didn't think that we would get a day for 2%. I don't have any exposure to IWM, but you could see where when the index has gotten overbought before. So a couple other things. First of all, the relationship between banks and small caps. There's a relationship here because the regional banks are the biggest weight that you will find in the IWM ETF. So when you take a look at these two together and overlay them, you could see the relationship here. It's not a perfect fit. From one time, I think the orange line is carry. At one time, the regional banks outperform small caps, but you can kind of see this relationship. Again, it's not a perfect fit, but they do track one another because regional banks are the biggest weight. So they were the best performer at one point. I think the semis overtook them, but I see the regional banks were up 2.1% today. So again, very strong. And then the other group that was above that was the semiconductors. That was kicked off this morning by Micron and earnings, and we saw just a ton of call buying after that, which is pretty unusual when you see a name being bought into earnings and then after the results, that a name is bought like that as well. Applied Materials, which had their analyst day today, they announced some pretty big things. I think a $30 billion buyback plan, was it? Let me see if I can find that real quick. A lot of information to take in today. $3 billion in shares is what their buyback plan is. So that came off their analyst today. Again, they bought the hell out of Applied Materials the last couple weeks, and that took a leg higher as well. I mean, they bought all this right after earnings. They had good earnings and nothing really happened to the stock. It was just kind of a bad tape. But the stock basically moved from $44 to 48 today, and they were buying those calls all the way up until their analyst day started today. So I see a lot of people. It's funny, you get excited, right? I mean, you get excited by some of these moves. Lamb Research up 5%, Clack up 5%. The majority of them are all up 2%. When the whole SMH ETF is up over 2%, you could see just about the whole ETF, all of the semi space was green. So, I follow people on Twitter. I see them all talking about individual names. Guys, it's the whole group. I mean, it's great. There's nothing bad about this, but a lot of people talking about this name and that name. It's the whole group that's lifting here. That's the same thing with small caps, right? Just kind of calling it. It is what it is. So, real nice to see. Remember back here we had this evening star put in, and we're coming right back here. So, they continue to be where the strength is. Notice we never really broke below the 20. We got a little bit too far ahead of ourselves a couple weeks ago, or about a week ago. But the strength is still with this group. Other names, and then I'll talk about biotech did also very well today. The FANG stocks. I mean, Google was an absolute monster today. Google, has been, I think, a frustrating trade for a lot of people, since earnings. And it looks like it wanted to go a couple times here. Once, people got excited to move over the 50. Maybe it does it now. It did finish pretty decently off the highs, but this has been a very frustrating trade. We were talking about it later. Perhaps people kind of threw in the towel a little bit on the frustration with these FANG stocks for the last month. I mean, Amazon looked like it was just about to break. It did hold, it held this value area. But to see this thing finally up 1.3%, but this has been a very tough trade too. And then a couple of the other names. I think Netflix was strong today. Facebook was strong. Facebook came back nicely after that nasty day the other day. But that's the FANG. The FANG proxy that I have is Frank David Nancy, FDN, and we could take a look at that. Now, so the other big move that I don't see a lot of people talking about was the move in rates. Now, this affects a lot of things. A big move down. The long bond future down 1.2%, or if you look at TLT, which is going to be a little bit different, but down 1.5%. And you can see what happened to anything interest rate sensitive when rates move this much in a particular day. Take a look at what happened to XLP consumer staples. Actually came off the lows pretty nicely. Utilities as well got smoked today, down 1.3%. So again, another reason why the S&P is not, wasn't up like 1% today, because you do have a lot of consumer staples, retail, excuse me, not retail, utilities. The gold miners were also down pretty decently today, down 1.5% as gold was off 1%. REITs were down 80 basis points. So those REITs, utilities, consumer staples, they got hit pretty hard. Like we were watching a couple names like Coca-Cola today, which was down 2% today. Pepsi also got crunched today. I thought Pepsi might hold that white line, the 200-day moving average. Nope. So oversold into the 200-day moving average, but it broke it. We'll see if it can reclaim it. Might set up for a nice trade there after a decent move. And we're talking about 119 down to 112. So, pretty tricky market for some areas. Just to kind of go over option activity, there was a lot the first couple hours of the day, and then it just kept on going. I mentioned all the Micron call buyers, just pretty amazing that they continue to go after that. We saw some bank buyers come in again today. RF, Regions Financials, TD Ameritrade, AMTD. We saw a nice sharp buyer of AAOI weeklies. They actually came in twice for those today. SYF, another financial. This was the trade that I took today, Deutsche Bank. I could actually shoot a video just on this, but I had talked about this in the weekend video. A lot of money coming into the European financials ETF. EUFN. So basically, what I do when we see this in an ETF, when we see all this money rush in, I start to notice, first of all, that money coming in the technicals, and then I start to look for either buying the ETF itself or individual names. So Deutsche Bank, we saw a big block of Deutsche Bank today. I didn't hesitate with that because I already knew what I wanted to do. So November 16 calls, we got in for a little bit under a buck. I think it went up to about $1.20 today, so a nice 20% gainer. And this is something that I'm holding on to for now. NRG, this is another name that option buyers keep coming after. So this one also had a nice day. This is a utility, but it bucked the trend today. Real nice move today, up 3.3%. Again, they just keep coming in to this name. It's been 3 or 4 times now in the last 2 weeks where we've seen a call buyer in that name. Cliffs, we started to see a whole bunch of buyers come in, and not just Cliffs, but Reliance Steel. Cliffs got the mention on CNBC on the halftime show. There was a little bit of X calls as well. We talked about this. This is the value that I try to bring in the trading room every day. I noticed that all the steel names were up big in China overnight. So that was the first thing that I talked about this morning was, hey, watch these steel names. They might be in for a nice bounce for today. Here's my little headline that I sent this morning. Or actually, that was last night. So I talked about it last night. The beauty of having a Slack trading system is I can communicate to people whenever we see something going on. I said, watch those steel stocks tomorrow. Chinese steel names up big on their industrial production beat. So, we saw, as I mentioned, a lot of the option players come out are just momentum guys, looking at moves, looking at momentum. So we saw buyers across several different names. STLD was another name that we saw some buying in. That name was up 2.6%. So again, a lot of these names underneath the 200-day moving average, but set up pretty nice for a day trade. So, then there was a lot of weekly stuff to go. I give something for everybody basically today. WETF, this is a name that I talked about quite a good deal earlier in the trading room as well. This is Wisdom Tree. They will do very well if the dollar remains strong. All of their products, their ETFs, not all of them, but a couple of their major ETFs hedge currency. So, for example, DXJ and HEDJ, those hedge the currency out. So they become very popular when the dollar gets stronger, which we're seeing in the last couple days. Just to kind of go down the list with a couple more names, I can't go over all these names because you can see there's a lot of them. By the way, IWM, there was IWM calls as well as a big Q's call buyer as well that went up. Before I forget about that, APA, we saw a little bit of calls purchased yesterday. They came in with a nice healthy block, January 47 and a half calls. I took this trade as well today towards the end of the day as I've been looking for some energy names and for aggressive option activity in this space. I mentioned the Applied Materials. Williams-Sonoma, another name that we've been seeing repeat call buying. Have no idea why, but they keep coming after Williams-Sonoma. It actually took out that purple line, VPOC, so a nice place to take profits. I played this one for a day trade. I bought some calls for $1.40 today and sold them at $1.90 today. So a really nice little day trade today, and I've got no risk left on that position. PayPal. PayPal's another name that we've been seeing call buying in as well. Just to kind of bring this up, I think we saw a big put sale earlier in the day. So, this is a name that really hasn't done too much, but take a look. It's not overbought anymore. So, this name has been in a great trend. So what a great chance. I'm actually out of PayPal. I had PayPal on, made some really nice money in it, and I think I got out right in here. So maybe time to maybe take a look at that name again. These were November 65 calls that went up, but we've been seeing that name come up a few times now. I was going to say there was one other name that caught my attention, but I can't think of it right this second. Puts, there were some active put plays today as well. The Greek ETF, I believe there's going to be starting to review the Greek banks. I have to figure out when that date is, but that's a couple days this week. We've been now seeing put buyers in the Greek ETF, and then a couple other names there. There was a big put buyer in XRT as well this morning. So that's it for today. Pretty amazing day in terms of price action. I really get excited when I see just a lot of things moving and separating, and that's kind of what we had today. So we go over again all these moves, during the day, so that you know why consumer staples are selling off and why semis are moving up, and so on and so forth, so that you can capitalize on these moves. So thanks for watching today's video. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.